All right, we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the Traveling Owls and International Seminar Design Incorporated, or ISDI as I will now be calling them, webinar. My name is Shannon Burnett and I am the Assistant Director with Alumni Programs in charge of the Traveling Owls portfolio. I'll be here to answer any Rice or Traveling Owls specific questions, but it is my sincerest hope that you take advantage of ISDI's time and ask them about their company and their trips. I do want to provide some friendly reminders for our Zoom platform first. So we're using the Zoom meeting format. So Jordan's going to present in a little bit here, and you might want to turn off your video during that, but afterwards we encourage you to turn it back on for the Q&A, but that's not a requirement. We do ask that you keep your audio on mute unless you are speaking to cut down any background noise. Jordan and Sinead are gonna give an overview of their program and the 2021 Traveling Owls trips that they have, and then they'll answer some questions at the end. If during their presentation any questions pop up, you're welcome to put them in the chat, and I'll be kind of monitoring that to make sure we can loop back and get you some answers. Otherwise, once they're done presenting, we'll come back to this format and you can take your video off mute and your audio off mute and just ask your questions in more of a dialogue format. So now we have Jordan Cook, President of ISDI, and Sinead Walsh, Senior Program Manager, with us today. They both joined this company in 1997, and so I'm going to kick it over to Sinead to get us started.
Thanks, you. Well, my name is Sinead Walsh, and I'm delighted to be here with you on this Zoom. I've managed many trips for the Traveling Owls and accompanied probably about 100 travelers over the last several years to all different parts of the globe. And I'm delighted to be working on these two trips that have been custom designed for Rice. And with no further ado, I'm going to introduce you to Jordan Cook, the President of International Seminar Design.
Hi, thanks, Sinead. And thank you all for being with us for this presentation. We really appreciate your time and your interest in the trips that we're planning with the Traveling Owls in 2021. As Sinead mentioned, she's accompanied plenty of groups herself from the Traveling Owls and many others. She and I have both been at ISDI for about 23 years now, and we've worked with Rice for almost a decade. I am thrilled to have the opportunity, and thanks Shannon for that, to be working with two great Rice faculty leaders in John Bowles and Lisa Balaban-Lilar, both of whom we've had the great fortune of working with multiple times, and we're always, what they bring to trips is something special. We love getting to design trips with them in mind. So without too much further ado, I'm going to jump into reviewing the two trips that we're offering. The first one is a domestic trip in the summer to the Pacific Northwest with Lisa Balaban-Lilar, and the second is a fall trip to France, based largely on the life and times of Thomas Jefferson, but also other early American founding fathers in Paris, but also places that inspired them outside of Paris as well. Let me just jump in here, and I'm going to start sharing my screen in a minute. You should be able to see my presentation. So first of all, there we go. Thank you very much again for being here, and we appreciate that you're giving your time. We appreciate that you're interested. So we will just presenting the two trips. The first one, as I mentioned, is a Pacific Northwest trip featuring the areas around Seattle, Washington, and Portland, Oregon. That'll happen in early to mid-July. You see the dates of July 7th to the 14th. It's a 7-night tour, so 8 days total of travel. And then the second trip is a few months later in mid-October, which is actually a lovely time to visit Paris and France. Crowds are starting to thin out, but the weather's still pretty nice. Featuring Thomas Jefferson in France, and led, of course, by John Bowles. ISDI, as you may know, we're a custom design operator. We don't repeat tours. We work, every tour we do is a unique collaboration with our client, with the professors that are leading tours. And so both of these trips have a real stamp of the professors that will be leading them, and we're really happy to have both of them with us. So let's begin first with the earlier tour. That's the Pacific Northwest tour, and we've titled it Gardens, Glass, and Gastronomy in the Pacific Northwest. It's such a lovely area to visit, and of course summer is a beautiful time to be there. And the trip is led by Lisa Balaban-Lilar, and you've got a little bio slide of her here. Lisa's been leading Traveling Al's programs for at least a decade. And while much of her great expertise is in Central Asia, in India, South Asia, and you can see one of the things I mentioned at the bottom of her slide there is she just has a new book, the Emperor Jahangir, that was named one of the best summer reads for history in 2020. So, and while that's got little to do with what we'll be seeing in the Pacific Northwest, it's if you're looking for a great history book to pass your time and let you know and educate you a bit more about this really fascinating time in Indian history, that's a great way to start. But Lisa also is she's an expert and has a really strong interest in gardens. In fact, one of the classes she regularly teaches at Rice as the Director of Undergraduate Studies at the Department of History is a course in the history of pleasure gardens. And so this tour in the Pacific Northwest is not entirely focused on gardens, but you'll see that that's a big component of what we're doing. And of course, Pacific Northwest, one of the very, very prime areas in North America for the variety of types of gardens and plants that are able to grow there. And the time we'll be going is a great season for seeing the gardens at their best. So the tour will be based in Seattle and in Portland. We spent 3 nights in Seattle at the Crown Plaza, which is a very nice and actually smaller for a downtown hotel size hotel, but still high enough to have some great views, great location, easily walkable from the Art Museum, Seattle Art Museum, from Pike Place Market, with a lovely park right across the street. And then we'll move to Portland, 4 nights there, staying at a really great boutique hotel in a beautiful historic building near their soccer stadium in Goose Hollow, which is a great area filled with outdoor activities, with markets, with restaurants, especially in the summer when we'll be there. Lots of outdoor terraces and beer gardens, etc. One thing I want to make mention of, because it probably is on your mind, Portland's been seeing some civil unrest, as you know, and while we'll be very much paying attention to that, I want to make clear that this hotel is not really near where there's been any larger protests or rioting. It's all a good half mile or so west of that area, and there's not been any of that kind of activity by the hotel. We'll of course be monitoring that. We're of course hopeful that by a year from now things will have much calmed down. But part of choosing the hotel was the fact that it's a really attractive area that also has been a very safe one, even in the midst of what's been a somewhat difficult summer in Portland. Anyway, moving on to just talk through the trip quickly. The day you arrive, we're based in downtown Seattle, and you'll start off with an afternoon walk through some of the prettiest and most interesting areas of downtown. We'll walk past the Seattle Art Museum. You can see the famous Hammering Man statue up there on the top right. We'll certainly meander through the Pike Place Market, which is famous, and any Starbucks fan, of course, will recognize that name right away. Just a great way to introduce yourself to what's a really, really fascinating and vibrant city, all within easy walking distance of our hotel. We'll have a nice welcome dinner that evening. Our next full day in Seattle will be really focusing on gardens and on art. The morning, we're going to visit a couple really special gardens. One is a more private, family-run garden that's on a hillside overlooking Puget Sound, just out of downtown. And then we'll go to Washington Park, which is the University of Washington's Arboretum and Botanic Garden, which is one of the most beautiful and expansive gardens in all the Northwest United States. That's a picture of it there on the left. It's got a wonderful variety of gardens, from azaleas to more classic formal gardens. There's a small moss garden. Perhaps most importantly, there's a beautiful Japanese garden, one of the very finest Japanese gardens in the world outside of Japan. We'll have a great lunch out and about, featuring local cuisine. And then in the afternoon, you can see on the bottom right there, that's the famous Dale Chihuly at his boathouse studio on Lake Washington. And we'll be making a stop by there, by special arrangement, to visit the boathouse, see his hothouse and the creative studio space. And he's got a great collection of his art there. We'll see Chihuly pieces in many other places as well during the tour, but it's a real treat to get to go to his personal space. Will be some free time that afternoon to just let you enjoy the city. Lots of great options that Sinead will be there to help you consider things you might want to visit, and a free night that evening. Then we will move on to the next day is a full day's excursion out across Puget Sound to Bainbridge Island, which is a lovely and sort of bucolic, very peaceful, tranquil residential island that's just a short 30-minute ferry ride across Puget Sound from downtown Seattle. And that our visits there will be focused on nature and on these beautiful outdoor spaces and gardens that are prolific on Bainbridge Island. It's a wonderful contrast to the great urban experience you'll have had the days before in Seattle. Probably the most famous thing on Bainbridge Island, especially from garden perspective, is Bloedel Reserve, which is a huge private garden slash arboretum slash nature park. And that's a picture of it there on the upper right. Really, it's been awarded many times as one of America's most beautiful garden and nature spaces. We'll have one of the top staff people at Bloedel there to greet us and to guide us through what's really an amazing series of outdoor spaces, what in a beautiful corner of Bainbridge Island. I've included a little painting of New Rose Cafe where we'll have a great a lunch together outside on their beautiful terrace space. And we'll be also visiting a couple other private gardens on the island that are not really open to the public during the course of our afternoon on Bainbridge as well. So it'll be a lovely day outside, getting to see some really beautiful garden spaces in a place that a lot of visitors to Seattle often don't get to on Bainbridge Island. So then our next day will be leaving Seattle and heading down to Portland. In total, it's about a 3-hour drive. We'll be breaking it up, though, with a couple stops along the way. We'll start in Seattle by going up to Queen Anne Hill. The picture on the top right there is a view of Seattle, which we'll make sure we stop, and you can get some great photographs past the Space Needle back to the beautiful Seattle skyline. And up on Queen Anne Hill, there's a gorgeous private home and garden that's going to be open especially for us, just for one last little beautiful garden space before we head out from Seattle and start heading south to Portland. A real treat stopping south will be going to Tacoma, which is just 45 minutes, 50 minutes south of Seattle. And a real treat there is the International Glass Museum, which is the big picture you see on the left. It is a relatively new endeavor in the last 15, 20 years. It was one of the big movers behind it was Dale Chihuly, in fact. The picture you see is the famous glass bridge that goes from the parking area to the museum itself, filled in with changing exhibitions of really fine works of glass art. We'll have a special guided tour there. We'll also have a great lunch in Tacoma at a lovely local restaurant, and visit also Lakewood Gardens, which is a really expansive, beautiful, classic Pacific Northwest kind of open garden space in Tacoma, before then heading south for what's a very scenic, very nice 2-hour drive south and crossing the Columbia River to get into Portland and Oregon. We'll be staying in Goose Hollow neighborhood, and there's a picture of that there on the bottom right. Goose Hollow, very scenic, picturesque, and walkable neighborhood with, as I mentioned, lots of great stuff all surrounding our hotel, which is the Deluxe. That will be our home for 4 nights. Our first full day in Portland is going to be just exploring the city, really getting to know Portland both through its neighborhoods, through some of its historic buildings, and through its gardens. And this will be a very customized trip. Lisa, who spent 15 years, Lisa Balabano, our professor, spent 15 years living in Portland. So she knows the city really well, and she'll be really the guiding force behind deciding much of what we're going to see and sharing some of her favorite spots in the city. We'll be visiting the Chinese gardens, which you see there on the left, which are amazing and sort of a must-see. Also, the International Rose Test Gardens are up on the right. The Rose Festival, which we will not be attending, but the roses will be in great season bloom when we're there. And it's really one of the most impressive rose gardens in the world. We'll have a special private guided tour there by one of the experts from the garden. Down below on the bottom right is the Pearl District, which is really vibrant and fun historic neighborhood north of downtown Portland. And again, it's been a very quiet area this year, even filled with great, murals and wall art and markets and all the sort of local culture that makes Portland such an attractive destination and pretty unique among American cities. So that'll be a great full day dedicated to the city of Portland and getting to know it well through its neighborhoods and some of its gardens. The next day we're going to, well, actually the next 2 days, you're going to be heading out of Portland one full day and then another half day to get down into the Willamette Valley, which is the beautiful, very lush and fertile valley just south of Portland. Well known for its great wines, also some really great local foods that grow there. And our goal with these couple of days in the Willamette Valley is to really expose you to both natural beauty. We're going to visit a private vineyard and have a special tour and tasting there. We'll have a lunch at a beautiful outdoor venue, kind of being able to soak up nature. You can see the Gordon House there on the top right. That's a Frank Lloyd Wright, beautiful Frank Lloyd Wright home that we're hoping, we have to still wait special permission, but we're hoping to be able to get you in to get a private tour of that. Just a whole variety of experiences around food, around wine, and around just the beauty of nature. We're going to visit the Oregon Garden, which is a newer but wonderful botanic garden that's in a smaller town called Silverton, which is one of the prettier, more charming, characteristic towns south of Portland. To keep up with our garden theme through the tour. You're gonna have we'll get back to Portland on the last day of the tour in time for lunch and a free afternoon, lots of time to shop, explore a bit on your own. Again, Sinead will be there to help you spend your time as you'd like. And that will be the final day with a great farewell dinner, and then we'll all head back home after 7 great nights, 8 days of touring in Washington and Oregon. I just want to point out the food on the tour will be a big part of it, or gastronomy is not in the name by accident. Sinead's working with Lisa also and helping choose some really great local restaurants, very authentic, popular local places that often we can have outdoor dining when we can. That's it's attractive anyway, and with the world we're in, that's also a great way to manage meals together. We'll be focusing on the great regional wines. Both Washington State and Oregon, especially Oregon, produce some really top-notch vintages, and we'll be exploring those through the various lunches and dinners on the tour. Getting to just the key information about the tour, so you can see again the dates, the 7th to the 14th of July with 3 nights in Seattle and 4 nights in Portland. The tour price is $39.95, and there's an $895 single supplement for the program. And we should have the tour brochure ready with all the pretty full details on the tour probably within the next several weeks. So we'll keep your eyes out for that. And of course, just let Shannon know, if you already know you're seriously interested, we'll make sure you get that brochure as soon as it's available. So that's a good rundown of the Pacific Northwest trip, and with Professor Balaban-Lalare, and hope that you'll be interested in it. We'd love to have you along. I'm going to move now to the French trip with Dr. John Bowles. And of course, this is Thomas Jefferson's journey through France, being offered in the autumn, October 13th to 23rd. It's 9 nights in France altogether. And of course, led by John Bowles, who is famously one of America's very, very top Jefferson scholars and scholars in American history, the history of the South. He's done versions of this tour before, and he's got great ideas of some great new visits that we're also including, but some of the classics, and he's a wonderful interpreter of what you'll see in France. Many of the places we'll visit, there's still the buildings survive as they were when Jefferson was there, but not all of them do. And Professor Bowles is excellent at bringing those places to life and connecting with the history of all the things that happened there. John Bowles, certainly one of the better known Rice professors, I'm sure, of the last 25, 30 years. He's a Rice graduate himself, and his Jefferson, Architect of American Liberty biography was universally acclaimed in reviews. Would be obviously, many of you may have already read it, but well worth a reread before you head off to France. And we've had the good fortune of having several trips, having designed several trips for Dr. Bowles. And this is another one where he's had a really, and will continue to have a really strong influence on what the tour and itinerary will look like. Again, what is the purpose of the tour? What's the idea behind the tour? It's really going, the trip is in Paris for the first several days, but then we move south from Paris in sort of a direct line south, first heading to Burgundy and Lyon, and then further south into Western Provence and Languedoc, being based in Nimes, France. It's a beautiful Roman city. And the idea is in Paris, we'll really jump into all the strong American history connections that are there, visiting places that the Jefferson and the founding fathers lived, worked, where they negotiated treaties, where they like to go to eat, etc. And very importantly, Dr. Bowles will be giving a series of lectures during the tour. Obviously, he's a great lecturer and adding a lot of depth, preparing you for what you're going to be seeing over the course of the next couple of days, and talking a lot in depth about Jefferson's life and his experiences while he was a minister in France. We'll be going to see some historic monuments that were really of special interest to Jefferson, things he thought were really beautiful, things that were new in his time that then had a really strong influence on his own thoughts about architecture and what he wanted the new American nation to look like. And in the south of France, we'll be focusing on Jefferson's time there, but also a lot of the things that really Jefferson loved. So one of them, of course, famously is wine, and we'll be sampling some of the vineyards and some of the wines that Jefferson especially loved from the Côte d'Aron and the central southern part of France. But we'll also go to cities like Orange and Arles, and especially Nimes, where we'll actually be staying, to visit ancient Roman ruins that were very inspirational to Jefferson, places he really loved and that influenced his own architectural pursuits later on as he became leader in the United States. Talking about our hotels quickly, we're going to stay at the Hotel Rochester in Paris, which is in the 8th arrondissement, a great location, a very upscale area, very near the President Macron's residence and offices at the Elysee Palace and the Champs-Élysées, the Grand Palais. All those things are within easy walking distance. A beautiful, beautiful upscale neighborhood. And the hotel itself is a lovely historic building that's got a great bar and some wonderful indoor spaces as well. Beautiful indoor courtyard that's sort of a garden space. It's a nice oasis from the busyness of Paris. We head down to, and forgive me that one thing's wrong on this slide. It should say Lyon rather than Nimes on that slide. The Hotel Fourvier is a beautiful converted 19th century convent that is only about 75 rooms. So this huge building you can see with very spacious rooms and lots of great amenities up on the Fourvier Hill. You can see in the picture the Basilica Fourvier that's famous for the views over the city, not far away at all from our hotel. It's a beautiful upscale superior 4-star hotel. That's a nice space for our 2 nights in Lyon. And then our last hotel will be the very grandiose, elegant 5-star Hotel L'Imperator, which is in Nimes, Nimes in Languedoc, just across the border from Provence. A lovely, lovely kind of garden city. And the L'Imperator is right in the historic part of the city, an easy walk from some of the Roman ruins that will be the focus of our touring. Beautiful Art Deco themed hotel all the way through, from guest rooms to the public spaces. It's one of the more beautiful urban hotels in the south of France, and we'll spend our last 4 nights staying there. To walk you through the itinerary, and I'll try to go quickly. I don't want to keep doing, but I want to show you the great highlights that we'll be visiting. On the first day, we're going to be taking a walking tour on the left bank of the Seine, that beautiful bohemian, quieter neighborhood of France, and focusing especially on places that were unique to Jefferson. Jefferson lived with his daughter on the left bank for several years. We'll be visiting the site of his residence there. The top right picture is the interior of the Hotel de Somme, which is the Legion of Honor building. That was a brand new building when Jefferson was there. It just had been built, and he writes about being sort of stupefied by it and just sitting across the river on a bench, watching as the building was finished up, just sort of awestruck and in love with the architecture. And we'll certainly visit it. The plaque you see on the bottom right we'll stop by there. It's the site of the old Hotel de York, which is where the Treaty of Paris was signed that ended the American Revolution. And you can see that Benjamin Franklin, John Jay, John Adams were all there. We'll be focusing on a lot of places like that on this walking tour. We'll see the house where John Paul Jones lived. We'll see places where John Adams was active. We'll go past the Odeon Theater, which is one of Thomas Jefferson's favorite spots for performances. And then we'll see the Pantheon, which is the large picture on the left, which again was a newer structure when Jefferson visited, and he loved it. And you can see, obviously, it had some impact on the neoclassical architecture we'd see in America later on. So that'll be our first day, and obviously a great welcome dinner at Le Procope, which was a restaurant that existed already, was already a historic restaurant when Jefferson was in Paris, and it was one of his favorite spots for dining. It's still alive now, 200 plus years later, and we'll have a great festive welcome dinner there. Our first full day in Paris will be focused on Jeffersonian spots and with a kind of a unique theming as we go through. So we'll be starting at the Bourse de Commerce, which is this lovely rotunda building you see on the left. That building is, by the time we're there, it will be reopened. It's being completely renovated and then redesigned on the interior by Tadao Ando, the famous Japanese architect. Francois Pinault, who's probably the world's most famous and extensive art collector, contemporary art collector, just paid for a huge renovation of the building. The exterior is going to remain exactly like it was. And it was one of Jefferson's favorite spots. Again, it was only about 30 years old, 20 years old whenever Jefferson was living in France, and he used to pass this spot all the time and wrote about it frequently. We're going to do a special customized tour at the Louvre. So if you've been to the Louvre before, this will probably be something a bit different. If you've not been to the Louvre, don't worry. After our tour, you'll still have some time to go visit some of the, we'll give you some free time to explore the museum on your own and see some of the great other historic famous art that's there. But our tour is going to focus on art from the time that Jefferson was in Paris. So the artists that were working in France and at that time, the Houdin, who's the sculptor, you see his busts of both Benjamin Franklin and George Washington that are in the Louvre, and we'll certainly be visiting there with just a unique way to view the Louvre from art from basically the 1750s through the early part of the 1800s, focusing on connections with the American Revolution and Jefferson's own story in France. We'll then afterwards have a bit of a brief walking tour around the area. The Hôtel de Coislin, which you see on the bottom right there, was the site where France officially recognized the new United States of America. That was our first major recognition as a new nation, and to cause a great celebration among Jefferson and a lot of his fellow founding fathers. And we'll get to see that beautiful building on the Place de Concorde. So it'll be a great central Parisian focus day. You'll have a wonderful lunch. You'll see the Palais Royal as well, which is one of the, again, new in Jefferson's time, but one of the great sort of neoclassical spaces of Paris that inspired Jefferson. Our next day, we'll be heading out from central Paris to go to Versailles. Versailles, always worth another visit if you've been there, but especially worth a visit with Dr. Bowles. He can kind of walk you through some of the more dramatic instances of history that related to our own revolution and the birth of our country that relate to the royals at Versailles. We'll visit both the palace itself and the gardens. After a full good 5 hours or so at Versailles, we'll also stop at the Désert de Retz, which is a sort of very unusual and fun garden of follies, a classic sort of late 18th century, early 19th century eclectic garden, and still very much run in the theme and vein of Jefferson's time, as you can see by the character dressed a woman in front of one of the pyramid on the site. Jefferson visited this place and really was interested in it, and was Maria Causeway, who was one of his great friends, went there with him. It's a very interesting space to talk about the more eclectic and contemporary time styles going on in that time that Jefferson was visiting. On the bottom right, you can see a statue of George Washington, which looks a very Europeanized maybe version of George Washington. but we'll stop and see that. There are several monuments to Washington and Jefferson that we'll stop by and pay our honors to on the way back into Paris after our day out visiting Versailles and Retz. The next day, we will head out from Paris and down into Burgundy, stopping in some really beautiful historic cities, very changing pace as well with these much smaller places. We'll visit Beaune in Burgundy, where you see the beautiful Hotel de Dieu, which is the building there on the left, full of medieval and Renaissance era history and architecture heritage. There's a beautiful Roger van der Weyden altarpiece that's part of the collection there. Jefferson loved Beaune, and he also visited Mâcon, which is the city you see on the top right. That's the old cathedral of Mâcon. John Bowles specifically wants us to visit these places to draw connections with places that inspired Jefferson that he either visited or had a particular interest in. Louis Latour Vineyard is on the bottom right there. We'll be visiting vineyards in this area, the Beaujolais. It's particularly known for Beaujolais wines, but also other great vintages. And we'll stop at a beautiful vineyard in the area. This is a great introduction to wine, which will be something we'll be revisiting more than once during the course of the trip. The city of Lyon will be our home for a couple of nights, as we mentioned, the convent converted hotel. You can see an overview of Lyon from the basilica that I showed you in the earlier picture, and we'll be having a full day touring especially the historic center, the Vieux Lyon, which is in the center of that the peninsula, it's called, between the two rivers. And you get a great view of Vieux Lyon, of Old Lyon there on the top right. Very, very charming, and lots of quiet streets filled with great shops. And our local guide, and John, will walk us through pointing out some relevant stops along the way. We'll go to the Paul Bocuse market, which, if you're into gastronomy and food, is an absolute must. It's famous all throughout France and the world for all the high-end vendors and the things that are there. Lots of great traditional French foods. And we will also dip into the world of chocolate. Why not? While we're in this great Bernachon, which is one of the great historic French producers, has a wonderful showroom, and they'll give us a VIP visit and special hosting and some tasting of some of their great connections, basically. Some free time that evening in Lyon before we then transfer the next day and head down further south. And we'll be along the Rhone River this way, and this is the Côte de Rhône area, which is well known for its very, very prestigious wines and vineyards all along, which we'll be sampling. Tournon is the village that you see on the left there, up on a hill overlooking the Rhone, and we'll visit there. It's one of John Bowles' favorite spots in this part of France, and we'll do a great walk with him. Above Tournon, you see the vineyards there on the right. This was Jefferson's very favorite French wines come from this area, and we'll be stopping by vineyards that produce the same wines 200 years later and get a tasting of what he so loved. We'll also tour the Roman ruins in Orange. Orange is a lovely, smaller provincial city on the way down to Nimes, and that's the Roman theater you see there on the bottom right. We'll end in the city of Nimes, which is famous for the Maison Carrère, which we'll talk about in the next slide, but also just a lovely, less touristed southern French city. A great place, I think, to be based for the last 4 days of the tour. So this is the famous Maison Carrée, which was famously much beloved by Thomas Jefferson. He talked many times about being sort of stupefied in front of it and just sitting in awe. It's right in the historic center of the city. Our hotel is almost right next to the amphitheater, which is one of the best surviving Roman amphitheaters in the world. You see that up on the top right, just in the very center of the city of Nimes. There's also beautiful gardens. You can see one of the more beautiful gardens there which was brand new built when Jefferson would often visit Nimes. So just a full day dedicated to a really great city that many people haven't had the chance to visit. And we'll get to see it in depth, and John will be lecturing about Jefferson's time there. Not that far from Nimes, less than an hour, is the lovely Provençal city of Arles. And Arles has lots of great history to it. And perhaps the most famous is Vincent van Gogh, who spent the last years of his life there. And you can see one of his paintings. He has many paintings of Arles, of his time there. But so we'll be seeing some of Van Gogh's haunts and visit a museum where some of his best works are there. The Roman amphitheater in Arles, you see on the top right, is really, really lovely in a more flamboyant style of Roman architecture that was really a great interest to Jefferson. And then you can see just one of the town squares there. We'll spend a whole day in Arles. You'll have some free time to stroll its markets and streets, but also lots of guided visits to really get you to know, help you get to know the city well. Our last full day of the tour, we're going to go out to the Pont de Garde, the famous Roman aqueduct, which is about 20-30 minutes outside of Nimes. And we'll do a really in-depth visit of what this really amazing architectural wonder means and the history it is and its impact on later architecture. So we'll have a morning excursion out there. We'll visit a family farm and vineyard not far away. Get you back into Nimes to enjoy a free afternoon. And I showed a picture of the Maison Carré. There's the Art de Carré, the Carré d'Art, which is the Norman Foster contemporary building, a beautiful art space that you see there on the right. We'll actually be having lunch at the rooftop restaurant of that building on the top right, with a great view over the city and over the ancient Roman temple. And then I put a picture of the beautiful market. Nimes is well known for its very luxuriant markets, so you'll have some chance to explore those during the day on our last day of full programming in France before a wonderful upscale farewell dinner with John. So I couldn't resist putting in that Jefferson quote, good wine is a necessity of life for me. There's lots of it in southern France, and that'll be a big part of our touring with our visits. Great wine tastings, wine included with most of our meals. We'll really be trying to choose really interesting restaurants that are relevant to the history that we're exploring, and great restaurants as well, outdoor dining as much as we can. So I think you'll really enjoy the gastronomic side of the trip. And again, just the main tour information for this program. So the dates are October 13th and 23rd, and you can see how the hotel nights are arranged. The tour price is $5,895. That's for the land program, and there's an $1,195 single supplement. And our tour brochure should be available sometime in September. So just like with the Pacific Northwest, if you know you're interested already, please let Shannon know, and we can make sure we get this to you right away as soon as we have all the details finalized and the brochure ready to go. One last thing before I open it up for questions and any other comments from Shannon or Sinead. I just want you to know that we know that COVID-19 and the pandemic is a reality. We're all hoping that the world will be a lot different by July and certainly by October next year. But I want you to know that we're very aware of the safety measures and protocols that'll have to take place, even after a vaccine. And we'll be happy to talk with you about that anytime and share. We have a long, long list of protocols for safely running programs while we all deal with hopefully the end of the battle against the pandemic. But I do want to thank you very much again for having been. I know it's a part of your day, and we really appreciate your interest. I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and you'll see me again and just sort of open it up for questions, or if there's any further commentary for Sinead or Shannon, we can do that. But if you have any questions, please feel free to unmute your Zoom, and we'll all hear you that way, and Sinead or I will do our best to answer. Hi, Nancy. Nancy, can you unmute your screen?
Yeah, there we go.
There we go.
I was happy to see that in France doesn't look like there's any boat, correct?
Boat's not part of the tour. No, we decided to keep it a land-based program for a variety of reasons. But yes, it's no boat programming.
Okay, great. Thanks. Thank you very much.
You bet. Any other questions?
Roberta in the chat asked about your cancellation policy.
So our cancellation policy is there'll be a deposit. It should be $1,000 deposit for the program. We do have an administrative fee that we're still finalizing for the tour. I think it should be $500 that if you cancel. We're working to have avoidance of paying out large amounts of money to keep any amounts that could be lost to a minimum. So we're keeping large payment dates much closer to the tour than we've been able to do in the past to avoid losses beyond what the administrative fee would be until very, very close to the tour. Sinead, I don't know if you have any further details, because I know we're still sort of finalizing the last elements of that with hotels and everything as we prepare the brochure. But that's generally our policy.
Well, all I can add is the French hotels have rather strict cancellation policies, so I am not too hopeful that we'll be able to get it beyond 90 days out. But I am still negotiating with hotels to try and make their contracts a little less severe if we have to cancel the trip. But we're pretty optimistic that this trip will probably be sold out by then. There's already people signing up before it's even really opened with a brochure. So.
How many people go on each tour?
Good question. We will eventually work this out with both Dr. Bowles and with Shannon. Our tendency right now is to keep tours capped, probably in around, we've not worked out a definitive number yet, but it should be between 20, 24 people or so. The minimum of the tour, I believe, is 20. I expect to get that just because we've already had a lot of strong interest in the program, but we will be capping it at maybe a lower number than we have with past John Bowles trips, just out of concerns about the logistics of safely running the program. So I wouldn't expect more than 25 travelers. We've not officially nailed that down yet, but that's what we're probably moving towards that. So.
And what about the one in the Pacific Northwest?
Pretty much the same arrangement. It should be around 20, low 20s. We're really not looking to run tours with 30 plus people in the current status of things. Thank you for asking.
Any other questions? You can come off mute or put it in the chat. Okay, well, if you're, oh, Nancy, go ahead. Yeah.
I just want to thank you very much. Both trips look very interesting, and I'm sorry I have to jump off for something else. So
thank you so much for being with us, Nancy. It was great to see you.
okay.
I want to thank you guys, and many of you have been on past trips with us.
Wow.
We really, really appreciate that, and we'll be very hopeful we get to see you again. So
I like the fact that the French in Paris are some different things. You know,
good. Yes.
All along there's some different.
And I've got to give Dr. Bowles some credit for that. He was very much wanting to paint things a bit. You know, there's some things we have to see on that program.
Yeah.
I think he wanted to create a bit of diversity of visits, which I like too. So take care.
Well, if you all are like me and your questions immediately follow presentations, or if they come up, weeks later, you can reach out to me at travelingowls@rice.edu, and I'll make sure that your questions get answered. If I know them, great. If not, I'll reach out to Sinead or Jordan, and we'll make sure that you've got that. Linda, did you have a question?
I was going to ask, Sinead and or Jordan, do you go on these trips?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Sinead.
I was still unmuted. Yes. Yeah, we always have an ISDI program manager with the trips. So yes, there will be definitely one of us accompanying the trip.
Yeah, right now we're planning for Sinead to be along. Things could potentially change, but she most likely be going on both of the trips. So.
Yeah. And I've traveled extensively with Lisa. We've been on 4 or 5 trips together. So we are good partners.
The more expert minds that are available, the better, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. This is Liz Williams. I've traveled with Sinead extensively, and it's a joy. So, hey, I'm not visible at the moment.
Fine, Liz.
Asking, but hi there.
Awesome. Well, like I said, please don't hesitate to reach out to travelingowls@rice.edu. Thank you so much, Jordan and Sinead, for sharing your wisdom on these trips. I hope you guys are excited about them like we are. And thanks for taking time out of your day to spend with us. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Goodbye. Thanks everybody for being here.
Both trips sound amazing. So thank you.
All right, Linda, we'll hope to see you. Thanks again for being with us.